Hello, class. So things are coming along pretty well with our drawing. Things are starting to look pretty good. Um, in this video, what I want to talk about is the thing we brought in from our 3D model and our render engine, which is the house. Like, can we improve it more? One of the nice things about renderings that can look really well is playing with lighting and adding a little detail and things like that. So there's a couple simple tools in Photoshop that I want to introduce in this lesson that can really be used any number of ways that can help enhance lighting, can help enhance some detail in this, because like it's still, this building still looks a little flat both in lighting and in sort of detail, because like wood siding is not perfect. Like this is perfect siding and perfect brick and things like that. And so a little bit of artistry can go a long way to just giving your drawing a little feel. And so we're going to learn the dodge and burn tools today in this lesson. We're going to do them on your house layer, but just in case you mess up and actually to control things later on that we might want a little more control of, let's duplicate the layer. So I'm going to come over to my building layer. I'm going to right click over top of it and go duplicate layer. Just up here, just say okay, building copy is fine. I've got a copy there. Now to find your dodge and burn tools, which is what we're using, you want to come down to the bottom one. If you don't see them, then just click and hold it. It'll pull up this list and we have dodge and burn. And let me start with the dodge tool here. So what the dodge tool is going to do, it's going to slowly sort of make the colors brighter. And so I'm going to just use a few thoughtful things to make a decision about where I want things to be brighter. One thing is I just want to pull the eye towards the center of my house, to the door, as the experience of like walking up to the path, right? So one way of doing that is just to make it brighter. So I'm going to click with my mouse and hold and just sort of move my mouse around, and you can see it subtly gets lighter. If I let go and click again, it's going to get even slightly lighter again. And if I get a little bit on the chimney, perfectly fine. If I get a little bit on the siding, perfectly fine, because it's just meant to sort of pull the eye in towards that center space a bit right there. So you can see that already sort of brightened up this bright spot here. It just makes it feel more warm, is a little bit warmer, more interesting, and just a little bit of extra detail there sort of enhances the shadow. Now the other thing I'm going to do is, a lot of times with siding and other things with brick, oftentimes they get a little bit darker, maybe on the bottom as things run down, a little bit lighter in the middle, maybe lighter on the top, possibly darker depending on how the roof overhang is. It doesn't matter. I'm gonna actually just say, the top of this whole plane just a little bit lighter, maybe just like a little bit of streaks of white just coming down, just to make some imperfections in that siding, just a little bit. And then same thing over here. I'm going to just do a little bit lighter across the top and side, and maybe just some sort of imperfection streak down the middle. And I can maybe do the same thing here and here if you want. And even on the brick, the same thing might happen. Just sort of light at the top, maybe just some squiggle lines somewhere just to make the bricks look a little imperfect. Okay, just like that. Now you could argue that what I've done is too strong, and it sort of intentionally was done too strong. So one reason for making this extra layer here is that I can just go ahead and make the transparency to set how strong I want those imperfections to be, and just play it by eye. A little bit is good, too much is not, so set it where you want to be. If you want to add more, just come and sketch more with the tool, with the dodge tool. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing. I could use the burn tool, which is going to darken things on the same layer, but I like to separate them out to have full control. So I'm going to go back to my original building layer, right click, and say duplicate layer again, and say OK. And I'm going to come over here and go to my burn tool, which again is going to make things darker. And the opposite of this is like, I'm going to darken up the bottoms, click and let go, and click and let go to sort of build up the strength. As you move your cursor, again, if it's too dark, that's fine. We'll play with transparency. So just give a little bit of life against the base of all these elements down here. This, even again, the brick can have the same thing happening. Darker on the bottom. Making it darker on the bottom also sort of gives it weight, or like a base, and have it sort of like feeling like it's setting down, just sensing gravity, which is nice. Above this roof plane, maybe I do the same thing just a little bit to give there some variation there. Whatever you think works well. And then when you have it done, you can play with the transparency to make it as sort of dark or less visible as you feel works. And you can see just a little bit of that effect, just those adding those imperfections, even if they're roughly hand sketched, I think just gives it weight, gives it interest, gives it visual interest, draws the eye in certain directions, just like that. Now I can do the same thing. I'm going to cheat a little bit. I want to, just as I brighten this area, I think I want to brighten the glass in that area too, which is a good effect. So I'm going to go to my windows, and I could duplicate the layer, but the problem is I have to work with the mask and everything else. So I'm just going to do it right in this layer because I'm comfortable with it. I'm going to come here, I'm going to go to dodge, and I'm going to also brighten the window layer because that didn't, since I copied over with the windows, that wasn't included in the work I was doing. So I'm just going to really work on these windows and get them a lot brighter and sort of bring your eye right to this bright spot in the center right there. All right, I think that's looking pretty good. Yeah, there we go. That's working for me. Much more interesting, much more alive. And I think I'm going to do one more thing just to show you what you possibly can do. And this stage is really all about artistry. I could keep using dodge and burn or other things, but you know, you could also just throw on color and do interesting things. So I'm going to make a new layer here and above the dodge and burn layers I just made. I'm going to call it Hue Shift. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here. I'm going to set my color to like a pale yellow orangey kind of color. I'm going to go to my marquee tools and select the ellipse tool. And I think I'm going to do an ellipse across this face here about the whole thing. We're going to make several adjustments to this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to edit fill, and I'm going to change my contents to color and say OK. Oops, sorry, not color. That was my mistake. Foreground color, because I already set the color there. You could have set the color that way too. Anyway, it's going to put this hue across this thing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to change my blending mode to probably something like soft light. Yeah, soft light's going to look good, and you can see it just sort of warms up that corner a bit. I'll do Control D to deselect. Now it still obviously looks like a spotlight, so there's things we can do to blend this out. I'm going to go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian blur, and I'm probably going to turn this blur up pretty high just to really soften those edges there, just like that. Say OK. Now if you want to, it looks like I want to shift it down a little bit, maybe to the right. I'm going to try to bring a bit of warmness to this corner of the building a little bit and transition as we go across. You know, and it just, again, it just adds this little bit of interest. It's different. It's not the same as this. If it's too bright, go ahead and on this layer also play with the transparency a little bit. So I'll bring that down just a little bit. There we go. I think that is looking pretty good. And you can spend, again, you can spend however much time you want on the step of adjusting the colors as much as you want to make it look as interesting as you want. I'll probably end it here for this video, but go ahead and spend the time you need. You know, just a quick test here. That's what the building looked like before I made these adjustments, which is good. But here's just more interesting, right? And slightly more realistic, I would argue, but certainly capturing the eye better. And of course, it doesn't just have to be on the building. You could go ahead and do dodge and burn and hues on the people. There's an argument to say I should maybe brighten up some of the trees in the corners especially. And so you could go and do that work as well to really bring this thing to life. So we are almost done with this assignment now. We'll go ahead and just do one last video on some final cleanups and some final thoughts on the drawing, and I'll see you in that video.